So good afternoon, everyone. I want to introduce the speaker for our second guest lecture today. We invited FUTUREFORMS from San Francisco, and FUTUREFORMS are Jason Kelly-Johnson and Nataly Gattegno. And Peter, Lucia, and others can tell many stories about them because they have very strong ties to UVA. In 2000, before 2009, they were actually faculty here, and Jason also studied in the undergraduate program at UVA. And when you walk today into the Fab Lab and you see many laser cutters there, please know that it was Jason and Nataly and Anselmo who made sure that this initiative of digital publication started at UVA. So today, the Fab Lab is an amazing, I believe, amazing infrastructure for the school. It grew over many years and many deans who invested into it, but they really started digital publication at UVA. So you can be, they earned an applause for this already. So strong ties. I personally met them in San Francisco when they joined CCA in 2009. And I want to quickly introduce their practice. FUTUREFORMS is an award-winning art and design studio based in San Francisco when they moved there in 2009. Founders, Jason Kelly-Johnson and Nataly Gattegno, both professors at CCA, California College of the Arts, have collaborated on a range of projects exploring the intersection of art and design with public space over more than 20 years. Recent public art projects have included sculptural canopies, art pavilions, fine art objects, furniture and lighting, as well as large-scale urban art installations and art master plan consulting. The firm's commitment to public art stems from an interest in activating the public and urban realm by giving the public a way to engage, creating places for exchange, places for pause, or simply a point of connection. The artwork is experiential, playful, integrated, and engaged with its context, but also strives to present itself as an identifiable element in the built landscape. To do this, FUTUREFORMS relies on rich, diverse, and multifaceted concepts that can resonate with diverse audiences, different ages, and users. The passerby, the tourist or the neighbor, the adult or the toddler. The work ranges in scale, sometimes freestanding and in other times integrated into existing frameworks. Some of the projects require a collaborative approach with engineers, architects, and landscape architects, and an awareness of the agencies and stakeholders who are all involved. I personally know a lot of their work and their installations in San Francisco and other places, and can only say these are amazing art installations, and by now they have a whole Bible and multiple books full of this work. Some of them are also dealing with real-time data that are then reflected in the installations. And what is really truly amazing is they fabricate these projects themselves. So there is also a kind of digital fabrication workshop, an element in their practice. With this, I want to cut it short so that Nataly can talk about all their work. Nataly, thank you for being here with us. And by the way, I learned that we invited you for final review, and Thas is still waiting to hear back from you. So I hope that you will finally come to Virginia, back to Virginia, and that we can meet you on site doing final review discussion. Thank you, Nataly.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Mona, and thanks everyone for joining. It's really lovely to be here, lovely to be back in this auditorium, and sort of be kind of a virtual presence in the school. As Mona said, you know, I have deep love and deep ties for the school and for Charlottesville, so it's really lovely to be able to kind of come back in different ways, whether on reviews or lectures or just simply coming to visit friends. So it's really great to kind of be back in some ways, but also to kind of share with you some of our work. As Mona mentioned, we've sort of taken a different path through architecture, if that's maybe kind of a way to kind of frame it. I dug up some old pictures of the Al-Mali Gallery and maybe familiar spaces, maybe not necessarily familiar faces to the students, but definitely to the faculty. UVA was really the place that Jason and myself really kind of figured out what we wanted to do, figured out like the paths that we wanted to kind of pursue. We came to UVA right after finishing our MArch degrees at the University of Princeton, and came to UVA to teach beginning design. I think I was teaching, my first studio was a 301 studio. I think Jason's was a second year undergrad studio, but also teaching basically design tools. Rhino, I think it was version 1.2 or something, if we're now at like version 8. So we were kind of really kind of coming out of graduate school and kind of really interested in technology and fabrication and how those two things can come together in order to shape and change the way that we make things, but then the way that we could also experience things. So we were fortunate enough to be kind of welcomed in a school that was okay with us taking up the O'Malley Gallery for a couple of weeks so that we could build our first interactive installation, which is on the left, the blue kind of installation Vivisis. We also were collaborating with landscape faculty, urban faculty, kind of planning faculty to basically kind of develop our vision of the future of Washington, D.C. In that same space. So we have a lot of love, but we also acknowledge UVA and in the path that we've sort of taken since then, which looking at the pictures of myself and Jason there, we were very young in those pictures. So it's it was funny to rediscover these a couple of days ago. So I wanted to kind of share with you, Mona kind of shared with me that you're interested in sort of like the research arc of some of the work, but then also like how we get to it, how do we make it, what are the processes that get us here? So some of these images are pretty pictures from a photographer, and some of them are like screenshots of what a digital model looks like. So there's a little bit of both here, because I wanted to share with you a little bit more of the kind of behind the scenes kind of phase. But all to say that all of this work happens with a really great, awesome team of people who work at FUTUREFORMS. There's Jason and myself. And as Mona mentioned, Jason did his BSc in architecture at UVA. I did mine in the UK, in Europe, and then we both met doing our MArch degree. And we basically are fortunate enough to have an awesome studio slash fabrication space that has a number of mostly architecture degree people who've kind of come from an architecture track, but have a deep fabrication interest and also kind of an interest in just like figuring out how to make stuff. I think that's kind of one of the things that Mona mentioned a little bit in her introduction, which was incredibly generous. Thank you, Mona, was that we're really interested in the way that the things that we put out into the world kind of influence and transform the spaces and our experiences surrounding them. So when you put an object out there, there's one thing to kind of think about what the object will look like, what color it will be, what material it will be, but we're really interested in also like how that'll change the way that we move around those spaces. How will it kind of transform your day-to-day commute, or maybe your weekend stroll, or your dog walk every morning, right? So the idea that these things, and all of the things I will show you, are in the public realm. How do these kind of interventions in the public realm really transform the way that we kind of use and the way that we occupy public space in cities? So one thing that'll be pretty apparent, hopefully, is that we are really interested in this kind of back and forth between a physical, a digital model, back into kind of digital space, a sketch on a piece of paper, a collaboration with a structural engineer or with a lighting designer. So we really kind of enjoy that feedback loop that is created just by like touching different media, trying things out in different ways. And, you know, from like little sketch models that you can see on the bottom to kind of full-scale prototypes and mock-ups. So that kind of back and forth for us is like a really kind of key way to be able to kind of understand what is important about a project, but then also what do we need to figure out in terms of how we make it. So just some quick images of sort of the atmosphere of the studio and the place. I wanted to share with you a couple of projects, more recent projects, and at the end, some things that are just in the works. So both kind of finished things, but then also like things that are currently kind of brewing, and also a little bit of a different trajectory that we've taken in the last couple of years, just to put that out on the table. I think the image that was shared with you was on the poster, on the postcard, was our project Orbital, which is located in San Francisco. It's the Uber headquarters, designed by Shop Architects. That's the bridges that you can see across the way and the building on the right. And we won this through competition. So a lot of the work that you guys will see is all won through either invited or entirely open competitions. So we put our materials forward, our portfolio, our statement, our resume, and then if we're fortunate enough, which we were in this case, we're shortlisted to put together a proposal, and we compete against other artists or architects or designers in order to do the work, in order to get the project. So in this case, we were fortunate enough that Uber selected us to basically kind of, and they awarded us the project. The call was for a project that was really small in footprint, but really tall in scale, because the site that they had was like a very limited kind of site, and I'll show you the site plan. But this gives you a sense of the type of package that we put together. They're just quick screenshots of a larger PDF, where we sort of have an idea. In this case, it was this idea of orbital and orbiting, and something that can sort of start from a small footprint, but then gain momentum and scale and size as it kind of grows taller, as well as kind of some images, but then just some really basic things like, how's the thing built? How will it be maintained? How, we partnered with Arup for this proposal. So we had Arup as our engineering lead. And then we kind of worked with them and collaborated with them in order to establish how this thing could actually be structured. And you'll see some images of that further down the way. On the top right, I think it's top right for you, unless I'm mirrored, but that is a physical model. So we very often, especially with these competitions, like to kind of test things out in physical model, and in some cases do kind of take the models to make our case when we interview, because there's a tactility to a lot of the work that we do, and a materiality that we feel is like really key. One of the key ideas for this was this idea of inside and outside, how the outside could be one thing and the inside could reveal something completely different. So from the outside, a kind of more fortified stainless steel reflective surface, and then on the inside, this kind of bright pink, purple kind of swirl that you guys saw on the postcard, as you kind of make your way up. Images of the physical model pieces that we're kind of working through on the right. That's just the little snake skins of the skin on the outside, and then some screenshots of just that collaboration with our structural engineer, just figuring out, okay, how are we going to build this? How do the panels fit back on? How does the structure kind of allow us to lock in the kind of skin system? One of the things that was mentioned is that we are an integral part of making the things that we design. So in this case, we partnered with a structural steel fabricator. We don't do structural steel in our studio in downtown San Francisco. That would be really hard to do. But we partnered with a structural steel fabricator who fabricated that kind of interior structure, which you can see. I think you can see my mouse if I'm putting that up here, but so you can see the kind of structural steel that kind of swirls up, and then what we call the skin, which is sort of a piece that, we basically prototyped, fabricated in our shop, and kind of assembled in components that we then brought to the site. Thankfully, the site is a couple of blocks away, so it's the closest one that we have to our studio, and it was nice to sort of be able to kind of be able to do that. One of the things, for those of you who know San Francisco, is that the side of San Francisco that basically faces Oakland, an area called Mission Bay, was all fill. Basically, the large earthquake that kind of devastated San Francisco, essentially all of the built fabric that had to be demolished, including parts of the Embarcadero Freeway, were basically put in Mission Bay. So Mission Bay, where the site of the artwork is essentially, you can't get to bedrock for like a really, really long way. So the artwork has a series of piles, basically pile-driven foundations that go down about 80 or so feet underground. So although the artwork is 33 feet, you add another 80 feet below that in order to keep, in order to be able to kind of structurally kind of support the artwork, which for us was sort of like a really interesting kind of challenge to kind of work with our engineers, but also the general contractors who'd built the foundations for the entire, for the buildings that surrounded it. So you can basically see these little columns. We call these like the stubby columns that went all the way down to Colma sand. And then the artwork essentially gets attached on it. So the foundations have to be poured really early on, when the rest of the site is being kind of, earth is being moved around, and then we come in at the very end to kind of put the artwork above that. This all happened during COVID, which was another kind of interesting piece to this. In San Francisco, construction industry was considered an exempt industry, so we had to proceed. The certificate of occupancy for the building, for Uber's building, depended on the artwork also being installed. So we basically had to kind of continue and produce the artwork in the midst of COVID and distancing requirements. So that's why you'll see all of these pictures, everyone is masked. I mean, it's been amazing to see it in place, amazing to see it grow, and like the city around it sort of kind of take a hold of this neighborhood. It's a new neighborhood. It's transformed dramatically. The Warrior Stadium is just down the way. It's basically where all of the new housing is being developed, and new park systems and new kind of investment in the city is taking place. So it's nice to see it filling out and being lived. And also kind of have this kind of back and forth between the kind of exterior skin and this kind of interior kind of layer as something that is sort of something to discover. Some people don't really realize it until you kind of stand right under it, that it has this kind of field of color that's available for everyone to kind of discover. So it's a quick video here that I'm gonna just kill the volume on this. Sorry, got really loud. But it gives you a little bit of the sense of scale, but it also will take you through some of the materials, and there's a exploded axon that will take you through some of the phases of construction. But the interior color, the pink and the purple, are anodized aluminum, and the exterior is a kind of is a stainless steel system because this is close to the water. It's considered to be a marine environment, so it needed to be something that would be highly durable. Here you can see us kind of assembling the different chunks that we could then take to the site and basically attach on the structural system that was already there. So you can see sort of these like carriages that are then kind of clipped back into the main structure. We were fortunate enough to basically be able to work with like a really awesome kind of structural steel crew that basically erected the frame, and then we kind of worked with an installation team to basically kind of put the panels into place. We then followed through with these like color anodized aluminum panel system that we kind of clipped into place. So the idea is that this structure kind of evolves, it grows, and it becomes bigger on the top than it is at the base, and it sort of holds that space. It's visible from a distance, and it sort of has a bit of a reflective quality. It's not necessarily one that can blind you, but one that really starts capturing the colors of the environment. This is our structural set, just to give you a sense of like how something like this does have a structural set. It has a set of requirements that we need to kind of work through and that we need to kind of respect with regarding the structural system. But you can also see how these kind of three legs, essentially, they're three identical legs that corkscrew around each other in order to kind of create the structure for a dome to exist on top. So the piece on the very top is essentially a pure dome with an oculus within it. Some of the detail connections that we needed to develop with Arup, and also in collaboration with our structural steel fabricators. And then some of our just sheets that we had in our studio strewn around with identifying like tags on each one of these pieces that we needed to track and kind of reassemble. We're also typically in charge of installations. So we have to kind of go through a pretty rigorous installation plan that we need to share with our client and kind of figure out how we sequence our work relative to anything else that's happening on the site. But it's been nice to have a piece that, you occasionally get like friends like going out for a walk with their kids and sending you a snapshot back of themselves in your sculpture. So it's sort of it's been nice to have something that's local for us. Most of our work isn't necessarily in San Francisco, so this has been sort of nice to be able to have close by. Similar, around the same time frame, we were also working on a piece for Intuitive Surgical, which is a robotic surgery company. So we developed a project for them that looked to kind of create a shade structure essentially for the entrance of one of their buildings, but also a kind of nexus point for like all of the different buildings that they had on the campus. One of the things that we really wanted to do here was to create a place that we could sort of allow people to gather under. Similarly to Orbital, there was a very minimal footprint that we were given. Literally, the circle of this thing on the ground is literally the site that was given to us because there was a gas line running on one side, a fire water main running on the other, and the building edge. So there was very kind of limited space that we were given, but we really wanted this to have this kind of impactful scale. So you're seeing here some of the more polished final pictures of it as this kind of focal point between, you know, a pretty disparate set of, you know, corporate campus buildings. But the driveways here, this is where people wait to be picked up and dropped off. One of the things that really fascinated us with this was this kind of idea that we could sort of tap into the Fibonacci sequence, this kind of idea of tapping into a mathematical kind of patterning or a mathematical logic that we could deploy. This was something that really resonated with Intuitive Surgical, our client, just in terms of the type of work that they do. So we really wanted this to sort of have this kind of mathematical reading to it as well. You're seeing here on the right side us assembling a physical model that we shared. You can see some images of that on the bottom right, but then on the left side, sort of this idea of like, how do you track that pattern? How do you kind of create a pattern that then also needs to get three-dimensionalized, needs to actually have a material thickness to it and be something that is you can make. So in some ways, the first step of, let's say, proof of concept for us is to make a small scale physical model, which you can see Nat and Brian making on one side, and then in parallel to that, kind of exploring this kind of idea of patterning and mathematical logics on the other side. What's interesting with this piece is that it has this kind of exterior view similar to Orbital in some ways, where the outside is sort of shielded, it's fortified, it's almost like an armor. Yes, it creates a beautiful shade that kind of tracks the sun throughout the day, but then there's a kind of reveal, let's say, in some ways. If you're above in the building looking down, this kind of other color, other field basically emerges where you can look into the artwork, and that kind of creates a completely different experience of the piece from above. One thing that you guys will note with this is, and we collaborated with Arup as well on this, is this kind of really intense structure that's internal to this, as well as Orbital, the project before. And we were sort of like, as we were doing these projects, we were like, okay, could we just stop at the structure? The structure could also be beautiful. Why are we hiding the structure? How can we kind of connect the structure and the skin in a much more integral way, rather than thinking of it as two independent systems? So these two projects sort of got us thinking that, on the one hand, you have this kind of exterior thing, but on the inside, there's this kind of much more intense kind of structural system that, right now we were completely hiding. So here you can see on the left, the structural system, and on the right, the skin that we then kind of applied onto the structural steel. Here you can see that sort of gradually happening as a kind of series of panel systems kind of populate the structure. And then maybe some more close-ups of just the quality of the material, but then also it's an angel hair brush finish, so it's not highly reflective. It's more kind of designed to pick up color of the surrounding environment. It's been interesting to see it. It's in Sunnyvale, so it's about an hour or two away from us. So it's been interesting to kind of visit occasionally. The material has held up. It's been a couple of years now. So it's been really nice to see it sort of hold its own. And we were fortunate enough, and I think that's one of the last things I'll show you, where we're working with this client again for another artwork on their campus, which I'll show you some more raw pictures of. But thinking back at that idea of structure and skin, and how do you kind of take that, which seemed as a challenge for us for those projects, and kind of iterate on that. So this is a project we did in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where we were really kind of wanting to push that relationship between the structure and the skin itself. Could we make that be one? Could both of those systems sort of collapse into each other, excuse me. So with this project, we were asked to basically kind of provide a shade structure in this newly pedestrianized street. So this is Patton Parkway, right in the kind of downtown historic district, but then also kind of on the edge of their innovation district. So we proposed a series of 3 elements that basically connect in the middle. And we'll talk about that connection in the middle. But that these 3 pieces could sort of like anchor that kind of entrance into this new pedestrian area. And what we tried to do in this case was work with our structural engineer to integrate what you can see here as these teal blue kind of ribs into the skin. So there is no interior structure into this. The skin is actually the structure itself. So you're sort of seeing the blue lines, let's say, which you'll be able to see in one of the next here. Maybe in this case, you can see she's installing this, but you can follow the force field essentially from the blue lines down into the structure. So you sort of have like a infill and then what we called a stiffener layer that kind of allowed the forces to be kind of transferred down into the base. This is a piece that we had to, we didn't install here, we shipped. And then it was installed in pieces in Tennessee. The thought with this is that it started off by being kind of assembled from someone being in the middle of it, and then eventually, as you can see in the bottom right-hand newspaper image, like it gets seamed together at the very top. So these 3 pieces, these 3 elements are identical. There's 3 of the same, and then they get seamed at the very top. And you can see on the right-hand image that kind of view down in, and then on the images on the left, if you follow one of these lines of these stiffeners, you're basically transferring the load down. So in this case, the skin is the structure itself. Excuse me. And here on the right, you're seeing a kind of view up into that connection of the 3 elements that come together. In order to create that space below, that since these images were taken, there's like a series of benches and a series of events and gatherings that happen below. Just to kind of offer a little bit of a tangent on some of the work that Mona mentioned that I sort of feel like is important to kind of give you a sense of are some of the more interactive and responsive pieces, some of the LED driven work that we've done. We've been doing those since actually our first installation that we did at UVA was an interactive installation titled Vivisys, and then we've sort of been working with that idea as we've kind of evolved our studio and our practice. So we've been really interested in the way that digital technologies these days can sort of offer us other ways of interacting and responding with our environments in real time. And obviously that's escalated like exponentially since 2020 when we finished this one. This is the piece we did and then got on a plane. I think it was March of 2020. And then as far as San Francisco and California goes, we were completely shut down. So that was, I remember this distinctly as the last flight out from Florida when we kind of arrived back. So Constellations is a project at a university campus. It's a quad. It's a quad between the performing arts department, the computer science department, the aeronautical engineering department, and also the meteorology department. So the idea for us was like, okay, these are disciplines that are all about patterns and making patterns and understanding patterns, whether it's a choreography for a dancer or a study of cloud formations for a meteorologist or computational patterns for a computer scientist, right? So the idea that this becomes sort of like a theater in the round for seeing and visualizing and understanding patterns, whatever those may be. So we really wanted to sort of create a space that you could basically experience and see these types of formations and patterns. So we basically created a space that you could sort of step into, step under, and then kind of enjoy the spectacle or the show, let's say, of pattern and energy surrounding you. We worked through a kind of a series of two essentially ellipses that are like canted off of each other with a kind of chassis of LEDs that are integrated into that system in order to sort of hold our LED channels. So here you're seeing the kind of two guiding geometries of these two ellipses that connect geometrically in space. And then a little bit of a sense of how one of the things that we were really kind of interested in developing here is like, how can we create a really robust LED kind of system in a hurricane environment, essentially? And, you know, how do we kind of allow that to sort of be maintained, yet still kind of perform and be beautiful and kind of be experienced by all? So you're seeing here some of our installation drawings and some of our assembly drawings. And there's a video that will show you how these pieces come together. Here's our last piece on the left. It's always the last piece that's the hardest piece to put in, because that's the one that obviously needs the entire geometry needed that last piece in order to become structural and lock into place. So, and here you can see us installing the LED system. And these kind of channels of LEDs across the perimeter of this, the interior perimeter. And then a video that'll show you a little bit how we were thinking both of these kind of lighting experiments. So how do you kind of allow these patterns to sort of like course through this? How do you prototype them? So these are all of the channels individually laid out in our studio here. As well as, you know, the kind of two guiding geometries that sort of came together in order to create the artwork. We prototyped, we actually fabricated pretty much everything on this artwork ourselves, apart from the structural steel rings and the columns. We did all of the kind of lattice work, let's say, the kind of woven system that's surrounding it, and then integrated and programmed the LEDs ourselves. So you can see us on the bottom, bending all those pieces, and then here, kind of guiding a local installation crew to basically kind of hoist these into place as we then come back in to kind of put the more, let's say, white glove pieces of the LED system. And these are just our quick GoPro feed as we were working around it. But it's been interesting to both see this. I mean, we installed it and then left and then never went back to Florida for a couple more years due to COVID. So more recently, we've opened the installation and we've reprogrammed it, which has been really interesting. Like, this isn't one that, you know, is triggered by an actual input. There's a series of shows, a series of kind of light shows that one can kind of visit and see. And we can also update those remotely. So we can do that from here and kind of provide that kind of transformation and change. Here's our quick tests with some just projection tests, just to see how we could actually kind of activate those that lattice with light. And then here are some kind of images of how the patterning, you know, how these different shows basically get programmed. So from the yellow swarm, that's more of like a bar of light that moves through, to that actually picks up wind speed, to the firefly system that is much more about kind of tracking satellites over the particular site over time. So the idea that you could sort of like course these patterns through the system in various ways. During the day, it's more of sort of like a kind of environment that you can move into. The LEDs are on, however, you probably aren't perceiving them. It's more of like a game of light and shadow when you're in there during the day. What's been fun to see, and, you know, it's sort of, you know, the life of our pieces after we've left, after we've installed them, is to figure out how the people who live there with these and kind of how do they experience them day to day? It's been great to see all these graduation photos coming out of constellations, because that's where students go to take their pictures, and it's a memorable thing that connects them to the campus. Or on the right side, the football team, that's where they took their portraits, and that's where they sort of create their team photos as they kind of promote their next season. So for us, it's been really lovely to sort of have this other life that these pieces take that's beyond anything we could design or anything we could anticipate. But it sort of makes us feel like these pieces belong to the places that they're in, and they're sort of become part of that fabric. This is probably one of the oldest projects that I felt like I sort of needed to include it because it's closer to you all. And it's a piece that's in Washington, D.C., that is responding to a direct input, which I think is sort of maybe something that some of you may be interested in. It's north of Union Station. It occupies a pretty long underpass north of Union Station, and it's essentially an interactive chandelier. Think of it as like a chandelier that's kind of up above that has a series of vibration sensors. As a train passes above you, it picks up that vibration, and a series of blue lights sort of like hover over top. For us, this was both, I mean, it's an interesting challenge, but for us, it was also really kind of important to sort of explore, how do we understand infrastructure that surrounds us? Like typically, I'm just thinking of like the New York subway system. I can hear the rattling of the tracks, and I know that the train is coming, or I can feel the gush of wind coming from the tunnel, or as I'm running downstairs, and I know that, okay, that means I really have to run if I really want to make that train. And we've sort of lost that with, being able to check the ETA of the next train or the next bus on our devices. So we were really interested in kind of figuring out how something like this, how an illuminated installation could also be sort of an infrastructural indicator, give us back our intuition into the urban environment. Above this, there's a series of, I think, 12 Amtrak and Metro North lines, and also Metro North stations. So we really wanted this to sort of become an indicator of, that kind of urban intuition that we sort of have sort of lost over the last, I guess, decade now. It's no longer years. And we basically kind of proposed these series of chandeliers on either side of these pretty wide sidewalks in this really, really long underpass that was pretty grimy and kind of didn't have adequate lighting to it, in order to propose, in a kind of illuminated walkway where, the artwork becomes your companion. If you clapped your way along, it could probably follow you, right? So it sort of becomes a companion in that underpass. You can see some of the images of us sort of putting this together. It's similar to constellations, right? It's the project we did before constellations. So it's sort of like a horizontal version of it, where we're sort of creating these like bracket systems that hold the artwork. And then the kind of LED strands that we then program and kind of integrate. The artwork is still there. It's still running. And it's been interesting to see it kind of evolve and change over time. The neighborhood around it has drastically kind of changed. Gallaudet University is there, and some of the new companies on the west side. This is the hallway outside my office here, which we very often use in order to lay out our pieces and kind of figure out, okay, are these lining up? Have we flipped something the wrong way? Did we, attach something erroneously? And then on the right, you're seeing the racks in our studio space as we're prototyping these. The last project is one that we've recently completed in El Paso, Texas, and we just got some really lovely pictures of. It's at the base of a building by Snøhetta. So the building is Snøhetta. We basically produced a shade canopy for that upper terrace, the thing that you can see that has the blue and the pink on it. We were asked to basically design a shade structure so that we could make that terrace actually usable for the building itself. So Snøhetta termed their building the cloud, La Nube. The idea that, clouds don't observe borders. They're able to kind of move across borders. They move across territories in fluid and kind of otherworldly ways that don't necessarily respect or necessarily have to respect politics. So our thought was to sort of take that idea that was sort of underlying the building itself and offer up a series of these kind of cloud environments, these microclimates underneath this canopy that would reinforce some of those ideas, but essentially create 5 different experiences. It's a children's museum. So we were really kind of taken by the idea of, like, leaning into the playfulness of this thing. It's mostly kids and their parents who will be experiencing this terrace. And there's, bubble machines and fog things and other things out there that we really just wanted to kind of reinforce the kind of playfulness of this. So in some ways, it's interactive, but in a little bit of a different way. Here's our concept proposal that sort of looked at this canopy as a series of cylinders that kind of array to create this canopy, but then embedded in those are these petri dishes, essentially, that sort of create these microclimates, these small environments that that one could kind of experience in different ways. So one's about light, one's about air, one's about reflection. So each one has it tells a different story. And here you're seeing the kind of the rendering that we originally proposed. The one on the far left is one that kind of looks at light and transmitting light in interesting ways. The blue one was all about water. There's an integrated misting system in this petri dish. The purple one in the far, the depth of the image is one that kind of moves with wind. And then these kind of smaller pieces, petri dishes in the back, are much more about like transforming your perception and your vision. So one that is like a highly reflective surface that you can see your face in, and another is a highly refractive surface that kind of refracts the environment that surrounds it. You can see a little bit of our construction documents. We basically follow a very typical architectural process, from like schematic to concept to design development to CDs. So we sort of work in that similar cadence. And here you can see the structural rings that then have these kind of infills of these kind of custom pipe extrusions. This is our structural analysis with our engineer, just to kind of understand, okay, where exactly is this going to fail if it fails? And, in this case, every environment has its own different kind of, in the Florida projects, I track the weather. I track hurricane season in Florida for our projects there, because I want to know. In El Paso, Texas is more about heat and kind of shade. So I think for us here, it was more kind of understanding how dense this circle packing system had to be in order for it to be structurally supported. On the left side, you're seeing the entire artwork laid out on a shop floor in Stockton, California. That's our structural steel fabricator, who was basically doing all of that kind of the primary structure. And then on the right half of the page, you're seeing things that we did in our own shop. So we basically prototyped the petri dishes and kind of fabricated and assembled the petri dishes in our shop space on the right. So you're seeing those kind of hexagonal, like honeycomb elements that sort of sit into the petri dishes. So those shipped separately and arrived on the site in order to come together. The image on the left is how we laid out the artwork on flatbed trucks in order to get from California to El Paso, Texas. How we shipped it there, but also how it had to be shipped and staged in such a way that when it arrived there, it could actually be lifted, and it was the right one with its right neighbors in order to be able to kind of install this thing accurately on that terrace. This is sort of an in progress view of the artwork. Before the handrails, before the landscape was there, we're still there kind of fine-tuning things. So we usually come into a project and start installing right around now. So it's not, painting on the wall that you come in at the very end and you put up. It's something where we do need to interface with some of the trades that are part of the construction crew. And one of the things that we sort of were kind of interested in sort of testing out is, we're part of the install crew and the kind of install team, but in some ways, after a while, this gets given to the museum, and the museum runs it, and the museum, organizes its events and has the things underneath it and makes sure the misting system is running. So part of this is sort of how do you both integrate with the rest of the project in the making of the thing, but then also how are you part of like the longer life of the project as it moves on. So the image on the bottom left is just sort of, I'll just play it from just a couple of snippets from the beginning, but it just shows that process of installation and how these things kind of arrive and how we then kind of execute and install on the site itself. Here you can see the different little petri dishes, the one on the bottom right, which is more about light, transmits light through these kind of acrylic rods that create a pattern on the ground. That's much more about these kind of dots of light. The purple magenta ones on the left are these kind of really thin aluminum fins that flicker in the wind and make a sound depending on the wind direction. And then the blue sort of, it looks like it's like a big bag of water essentially, has a misting system that circles it that kiddos can press a button and kind of release an environment of mist to surround them. So the idea is that that's the kind of more watery environment versus, let's say, the more reflective environment in the top right-hand image. Or this one, which is more of like the distortion of your view surrounding you. So you can sort of see the inverse of the artwork in the ball. The museum opened a couple of months ago at the end of last year. So we visited it. It's been awesome to see it kind of take a life of its own and become part of the playfulness of the museum itself. There's some amazing children's exhibits inside the museum, so it's awesome to be part of that story. So the last kind of couple of things I'm going to show you, and I'll be wrapping up shortly, are things that are sort of happening right now, things that we're working on right now. And I briefly mentioned at the beginning that we've sort of taken a little bit of a tangent. I don't necessarily think it's a tangent, actually. I should say it's like an offshoot maybe of some of the work that we've been doing. We've obviously continued doing these like larger scale public art pieces, but we've also sort of been involved in what we're calling kind of, oops, my apologies. My PowerPoint just crashed. I'll be right back. Let me reshare that. I think my computer didn't like the tangent that I was about to go on. All right, let me get back to it now. All right, we're good. Okay, wave, all of you wave your hands if that's not the case. Okay, oh no, okay, I got it. We're good. All right, so the tangent that I was going to talk about has to do with arts master planning. So this is something that I had no idea sort of existed out there, but it's something that has been, brewing for a while now. A lot of these public art pieces happen because there's someone who's sort of planning how these things deploy themselves in a larger urban environment. So one of the things that we've been doing the last couple of years, actually I should say last 5 or 6 years, is working with larger developments in order to kind of ideate and think a little bit about what the public realm can offer in terms of public art and how that can actually shape and activate the public spaces. So this is an arts master plan that we're developing for a really large development in Anaheim, California. So just a little bit south of LA, where, well, if either of you follow ice hockey, the Anaheim Ducks play in this round stadium over here. The area around, which is typically, like if you think of any stadium, it's usually parking lots that surround a stadium, right? That's all getting developed as like mixed use, residential, commercial, auditoria, concert halls, food venues. So this is a pretty large, it's about 150 acre project. With a whole series of different types of public spaces kind of dotted across it. And part of our role in this has been to kind of conceptualize the public realm and how does public art activate this space. So part of this is obviously our belief in public art as being the thing that can bring people together. It can create public space. but it can also become a valuable economic driver, which I think is one of the things that has become apparent to a lot of developers, is how does public art then become the thing that draws people to some of these places and some of these spaces. So for OC Vibe in Anaheim, we're basically developing one of the largest outdoor galleries, essentially, in North America, with a series of interwoven spaces that have very kind of varied public art experiences across the development. We sort of, I'm only showing you snippets here of a larger master plan document that sort of sets up a series of ideas, a series of kind of ways by which public art can sort of exist across this as a kind of really large pedestrian loop. But at the same time, how do we kind of create active edges? How do we create like a foreground, background, and kind of middle ground experience for these spaces that can kind of move people through a really large site by kind of creating these iconic landmarks across the way? So we sort of create these documents that start locating small objects, large objects, integrated objects, murals, public art pieces, freestanding pieces across the entire site. And then we sort of look to our peers, look to our colleagues to sort of potentially kind of to propose work for these types of spaces. So part of this is sort of bringing in a larger community of public artists and designers in order to kind of propose and kind of think through how these spaces can actually be activated and connected. And we've been fortunate enough to be doing this in a couple of places. We're also doing this for in Denver for Ballerina, where the Denver Nuggets play. So a similar kind of development around a stadium, currently only parking lots, but an amazing urban landscape and kind of architectural plan exists to connect this site, the greenish areas, to, let's say, the top right hand of the page, which is downtown Denver, to the bottom left-hand side of the page, which is where a lot of housing and residential development is currently happening. And how do you tie that to a cultural need for the site and the place? This is a really loaded, it used to be the site where buffalo roam. It's got an incredible kind of history to it in terms of the peoples who occupied this land and used it as part of their grazing grounds. So really kind of finding a way to respect both the history and the culture of the place, but then also look forward to its kind of future development through an artwork, and heritage can sort of become part of that conversation. So this is sort of like a piece of the puzzle that we're slowly kind of, developing as kind of an area that we're interested in kind of doing. And part of this is also, we've been fortunate to, like for the OC Vibe project in Anaheim, we're doing the first art piece, one of the kind of integrated pieces that sort of exists. It wraps around the corner of a concert hall designed by Populous and creates a kind of shaded space below for a bar and cafe. So this is Stretto, which kind of looks at it's essentially a musical score that wraps around the building in order to create a place below it. We've kind of proposed a couple of pavilions, but then also the Chattanooga project was actually part of a larger arts master plan that we developed for downtown Chattanooga, Tennessee. So the idea is that we sort of also are able to kind of set that first artwork in motion as a way to sort of proof of concept some of these things. So the last project I want to show you it's not quite a project. I don't have pretty pictures to for the next couple of things. It's literally what's currently, just been installed. So remember I talked about the piece that we're doing for the same kind of robotic surgery company down in Sunnyvale. This is a project that we're doing on their campus further down the way. This is a project that was originally designed by Grimshaw, that then SOM sort of taken over as an executive architect. You can see the building behind. But we are proposing the kind of artwork, not proposing, we've designed and built an artwork on the corner in the entrance of the building. So you can see here, one of the things that's important to public art is for it to sort of be visible from the street. That's always like an incredibly important piece of the puzzle. You've got to basically show that something is, yes, it's on a person, like on a building's property, but it's a public amenity, and therefore visible from the sidewalk and from anyone who can walk by. So for us, we sort of wanted this to not have a privileged viewpoint. We wanted it to be something that any way you saw it, it mutated and changed and appeared to be sort of a little bit different. So as you kind of move around this artwork or see it from different points of view or distances, it sort of has a different, it's a different geometry. It's essentially it's a Mobius strip, but it's a double twisted Mobius strip. So it sort of has like two pinch points in the way that it's developed. So similar, like a mathematical kind of underlying kind of logic to it. This is just an image of our concept board. I don't know if you guys use Mural or Miro or what you use for your kind of, the way that you guys share material and content, but this is sort of how we work. This is just a screenshot of that board where, those rectangles are sort of like couple of other options that existed along the way that we sort of chose not to do. At some point, we're like, okay, what if this is more of like a portal that you can walk through, or you can see on the right side that these were taller, right? So just a snapshot of like how we work through this. It's very much just kind of testing things out, sketching things out, making something, and then kind of making some decisions and kind of moving it forward. The piece has been installed recently. Here you're seeing our the shop up in Stockton that we were fortunate enough to collaborate with, basically creating the inner shell of the artwork. And then here you're seeing the kind of shingles or the kind of exterior skin kind of applied to it. And here's that like chameleon-like look as you kind of rotate around it. It sort of has these kind of different incarnations depending on where you are. You can see these are just like my iPhone pictures. The plantings were just planted a couple of weeks ago. This is a piece that just opened up in on Potrero Hill, actually. Mona Isla, you may remember this. It's close to the Whole Foods that we all frequented. And it's in an underpass as well. And it's a series of creatures in the garden. That's how we like to think of them. So here's us fabricating these four distinct creatures, who lived in our studio for far too long, for probably about a year, because the site wasn't ready to receive them, and then landed on the site, but promptly were wrapped because the rest of the site, as you can see, wasn't finished yet. So for Christmas, they were wrapped into these snow people who kind of adorned the area underneath the highway. You can see that's the 101 above. It takes you all the way from across California. And then as of 3 days ago, they have recently been unwrapped. Plants have not been planted yet, so it still looks very bare. The idea was the creatures in the garden. But these are these kind of three, there's solid pieces on the base, and then this like really intricate lattice work. It's intricate, it's very durable. That sort of kind of adorns the tops of these four creatures. We're working on a large pavilion down in San Jose, which we just got approval a couple of days ago to go into 100% CDs. So this is actually going to happen. Mona, Isla, I think this was like since way back that we've been working on this. This is a competition we won, but we're actually going ahead and designing what's a Levitt pavilion, essentially a concert pavilion on the edge of a park in downtown San Jose in collaboration with CMG, Page and Turnbull, and Arup. So it's a really large team that essentially is going to take over and kind of transform this downtown park for San Jose, and kind of create a space for public gathering and concerts. And finally, another project in San Francisco that was just restarted. We're kind of developing a wind protection canopy for the edge of this really, really tall tower. That's the tower in that image on the drawing, where we're basically creating a tall buildings shed a lot of wind, and this basically isn't necessarily a solar canopy; it's a wind canopy, so that as wind is shed from the tall tower above, it actually protects the pedestrians below. So it's both an artwork but also a performance piece that had to live in a wind tunnel for a little bit in order to be tested and kind of fine-tuned. So the scale is kind of evolving, the scale is growing, but in terms of the the arts master plans, but then also here in terms of some of the scale ups. But we really do enjoy kind of working in a much more kind of material and small scale as well. So I feel like I've been talking at you for a really long time. I was trying to hit 1:30 as our cutoff point, but I'd love to hear from you all. I'm happy to exit from this screen so that I can see you or walk up if you guys want to walk up and ask questions. I'd love to hear from you all and kind of get your thoughts or answer any questions you may have. Thank you.